The Baal Shem Tov once received a heavenly message. I don't know what that means. I don't get heavenly messages. But tzaddikim, they hear things or know things. It's a certain intuition. And the message is that he should travel to a distant town, and in this town he will learn the meaning of bitachon, of trust in Hashem. You get a heavenly message, you listen. So, off the Baal Shem Tov goes. It was the Baal Shem Tov's custom to travel, usually with a number of disciples. I think he used to travel with a minyan most of the time. So he would have a minyan. He'd be able to daven with a minyan. The Baal Shem Tov sets off, and he comes to this town. And it's funny, there isn't even a minyan in the town. This was not uncommon. In the shtetl that dotted the Carpathian Mountains, where the Baal Shem Tov lived, there were small hamlets with just a few Jewish families living. And amongst them there were times when people would come, like for the high holidays, they would go to a larger town to participate in communal life, but people lived very lonely lives, eking at a living and trying to survive. This town was a town along like a highway. So it was a well-traveled area. You know, in today's day and age, if you're going on the 401, right, you have this, you have these like 401, what do they call them? En routes, like you pull over and you can buy a coffee. En route, yeah. En routes are around for a long time, before automobiles. On the highway, people, you pull in somewhere. So there were people who maintained these taverns. People traveling by would come in, get a bite to eat. And sometimes also peasants from like the farms would need a little bit of entertainment. In that part of the world, vodka is a big thing, whiskey, vodka. They'd come, get a drink, and get a bite to eat. The Baal Shem Tov comes to this town and needs a place to stay, so he goes to this local inn. There's a little inn over there. The version of Motel 6 of the 18th century. And it's a Jewish owner. Okay, very nice. And they settle in that evening, and the Baal Shem Tov and his disciples daven Ma'ariv, evening services, and this fellow, the owner of the tavern, davens also. And they retire for the night, and they wake up early in the morning, and they have a minyan, do the morning services. And the tavern fellow is there davening with them. Jewish guy. In the middle of davening, suddenly a fearsome-looking police officer walks in, and with his billy club, he bangs the table. And he walks out. The man was unfazed, the person managing the tavern. And the students of the Baal Shem Tov saw that he wasn't fazed, so they weren't fazed, and they continued davening. After davening, the Baal Shem Tov went over to this fellow and he said, what was that? Why did the guy come and bang on the table? And the man said, he comes annually, once a year, to remind me that today my rent is due. He'll be back in an hour. Then he bangs twice. And then he comes back an hour later and he bangs 3 times. And I have to go and pay my rent. So the Baal Shem Tov said, okay, you can go pay your rent. We'll wait when you come back. We'll be here. The man said, well, I don't have a single penny to pay my rent. I don't have any money. So the Baal Shem Tov said, you don't look concerned. You have no anxiety. He said, anxiety? Hashem is going to provide. And they sat down, and the man made them breakfast, and they had this nice little meal, and the man was relaxed and calm, and he did not have an ounce of anxiety on his face. True to his word, an hour later, that fearsome-looking police officer returned, and he banged twice on the table. They looked at this man's face, as they say in French, garnished. Nothing. He didn't wince, he wasn't concerned, nothing, relaxed. He smiled, and they cleaned up from breakfast, put things away. Baal Shem Tov and his disciples sat down to study Torah, and this man was puttering around doing what, I guess tavern owners do. And true to his word, an hour later, the fearsome-looking officer is back. He glowers at the manager of the tavern, bangs 3 times on the table, and walks out. So the man picks himself up, and the Baal Shem Tov says, "Where are you going?" He says, "To pay my rent." He says, "But you told me you don't have any money." He says, "I don't. But Hashem is going to provide." And he walks out the door. The Baal Shem Tov and his disciples walk out of the tavern. It was a little porch, a little veranda. They walk out, and they're watching this guy. And they see him walking down the dirt road, and he's walking in the direction of this palatial residence of the Poretz, as he was called, the squire, the duke, who owned that area. And they're watching, and they see, as he's walking, suddenly a carriage is on the highway. There's a carriage. And the carriage stops at this man, and there's a conversation. They can't hear it. It's about 150 yards away. And the conversation ends. And the man continues to walk towards the Poretz's residence, and the wagon is coming closer to the inn. As the wagon is coming closer, they see suddenly the coachman gives a sign, the horses turn around, and they go back to where this man is, and there's a conversation, and they see gesticulating, and a pouch is given from the people in the carriage. They give him a pouch, and he continues to walk towards the Poretz's palace. When they came to the inn, the Baal Shem Tov and his students greeted these people, and the Baal Shem Tov said, "Can you please tell us what happened there on the road? We noticed you stopped, you had a conversation, then you left, then you went back." So the man said, "Sure." He says, we come from the larger town, and we heard that this tavern owner makes a marvelous blend of whiskey. And we wanted to purchase the whiskey. For next year. We wanted him to make us whiskey, and we were going to buy it. They call that pork bellies, I think, but we're not supposed to call it that. You know when you buy futures? Yeah. We're buying his next year's supply, whole supply. So the Baal Shem Tov said, "So what happened?" He said he named an exorbitant price, and we said to him, "That must be your rent for the whole year." And he said, "Maybe, but that's my price." So they said, "That's ridiculous. We're not paying that much money." And then he continued to walk. And then as we were driving, my partner and I were talking and said, he's known to be a very honest man. If he says that's his price, his whiskey must be amazing. Let's just pay it. We have the money. Let's pay it. And we'll know for next year we have whiskey. So we turned around and we gave him the money. And he went wherever he's going. But we're going to wait till he comes back. And we're going to get our first supply of whiskey. And then we'll be back during the course of the year. The Baal Shem Tov understood why the heavenly voice told him to come to learn the power of Bitachon. L'chaim.